I always have this saying that we do not grow in comfort. We grow through abrasion. We grow through those levels of being uncomfortable. That way we get to talk to the hard truths, and we learn and we grow through that pressure, so to speak. So in the time that we're allotted, and I say the time that we're allotted because normally I do this in a larger scale, like maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. So this is kind of my bite-sized version of this workshop. So from the time I have you, I really want to dig down and take that deeper dive into this whole thing called cultural competence. So let me just go ahead and dive in just a little bit about me. I am a visiting instructor of organizational leadership in Stockton's EDD program in organizational leadership. I am the former assistant dean of education, and I'm a proud alum of Stockton University EOF class of 1986. I'm a former teacher and administrator for 20 years. I'm also a motivational speaker, author, and consultant, and I'm the current pastor of Goodwill Tabernacle Baptist Church and have been for 13 years. I always like to tell people I am the proud accessory of my wife, Antoinette Gray, and I'm the father of 4 girls. Yes, I'm a girl dad. And I'm proud owners of 2 rescue dogs, my lab Marley and my Scottish Terrier Maisie. And that's a little bit about me. So what I would like to do is I want to find out who's here. So find out who's here and what are we doing today. So in the chat, could you please put in your organizational context, who you are and what you do. And we'll have Dr. Duncan. She'll just read some of who's here. Just want to get to find out who's in the room.
So we have high school social studies, school counselor, supervisor of PD, dean of education at Stockton, associate dean William Patterson, assistant manager HR in Somerset, K-12 director of curriculum, special ed teacher, ECS in Atlantic County, principal, high school teacher of English, Atlantic County special education specialist. I don't know if that's...
Okay. So it seems like we have a wide array. We have a wide array of teachers. We have administrators. We have K-12. We have higher ed. So we have that spectrum going on. So here's what we're going to be doing today in the short time I have you. We're going to be looking at developing a better understanding of our own personal cultural identity and how this impacts the way we build our classroom expectations. And for those who are in administration, how do we build our building expectations? And then we'll look at developing a basic understanding of the best practices of cultural competency and how they relate to classroom/building synergy. Okay? So those are the 2 things primarily that we're going to be doing. And when I do this workshop, the one thing I always find fascinating when people say, build a better understanding of my own personal cultural identity, I came here to talk about cultural competence. Exactly. And more on that to come. So here's part 1 and part 2. First of all, what is my culture and worldview? First, we have to look at self. What is my culture and worldview? In other words, what am I bringing to the table? Who is coming to the table? I always say we do not put who we are on the shelf when we go check into work every day. Who are we? What is our worldview? And how does this impact my pedagogy/leadership capacity? How does who I am impact what I do and how I perceive others? And then we'll look at focusing on students. Who are the students I'll be teaching? Who are the students I'll be leading? What do I need to know about them and their cultures to be an effective teacher leader? How can I communicate and interact more effectively with my students based on what I'm learning about their cultural context? So first thing we're going to do, we're going to dive into knowing self. Now, from your perspective, I need you to put into the chat, describe the word culture in 1 sentence. From your perspective, describe the word culture in 1 sentence. And I need you to do me a favor. I need you to try to stay away from Webster's. I want you to go to your perspective because we're going to go to Webster's. That's my job. Let me go to Webster's. But I want you from your perspective, just in your words, just a visceral response. How do you describe the word culture in one sentence? All right, let's make it happen. And as those come into the chat, Dr. Duncan will be reading those out so we can.
Sure. So we have environment in which we live, work, and congregate. Beliefs, assumptions, understandings, and actions I've embraced and practiced over time, influenced by people around me. Language, familia, region that defines me as Latina. Inclusive representation of race, gender, ability, belief in values, customs, norms, beliefs of a particular group. All the things that make up my lifestyle, environment, community, traditions, beliefs, family values, customs and beliefs, a lot of beliefs, shared beliefs and actions, worldviews, values that are developed from historical aspects of one's lived experience and the lens through which we look at the world around us, an agreed system of shared rules, beliefs, and values.
So from what we've heard so far from the interaction in the room is that there is a depth to this word that we call culture. That there's a lot of there's a lot there. What we're going to really find out is that there's so much more there than we realize when we look at culture. Because far too often when we talk about culture, especially young people, we go to how they talk and how they dress. We really pigeonhole them in terms of culture and what they look like. But there's so much more depth to this word called culture. So that's what we're going to look at. Now, this workshop is called Cultural Competence. And invariably, I've gotten the, wait a minute, cultural competence, are you saying I'm culturally incompetent? No. Competence means that you have a working knowledge of a thing. That's what it means, that you have a working knowledge of a thing and that you're willing to learn more about said thing so that you can become better at your craft and what you do. So what I'm asking is, from your perspective, again, describe competence in one sentence.
So ability to achieve, ability to perform a task efficiently and sufficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Ability to do my job, the ability to feel competent in expressing your self-beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Applied knowledge to achieve and succeed. Knowledge one has around a particular content and ability to execute on said knowledge. Strong feeling of ability and command over something. I'm most competent in my neuroculture, on a continuum towards competence in others. Potential to achieve. And abilities to be successful at your tasks. Ability to provide all students with relevant and meaningful instruction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I see
Competence,
some more coming in.
efficiency. Yeah, I think we might have most, if not all.
Okay. Now, normally when I do this workshop, I have an easel up, and I do triangulation. I look at what comes up the most. I look at the mode. What comes up the most? And in listening to your responses, what I heard that came up the most was achieve, succeed, and ability. Achieve, succeed, and ability. Now, I'm not going to ask you to say this out loud, but I want you to take an introspective look in terms of cultural competence, in terms of the dynamics of cultural competence and diversity and all that it entails. How much has been put into achieving it so that there can be success and that you can hone your ability in it? And I'm talking about this from a vantage point of over time, because this is something that we're talking about now at great length. But there have been times where this has been a topic that wasn't even touched, and some people have had 30-year careers and never touched cultural competence. So let's dive in. What is culture? Now we're going to Webster's. Here we are at Webster's. What I want you to look at from Webster's is look how in depth culture is. Culture refers to the cumulative deposit of knowledge, experience, beliefs, values, attitudes, meanings, hierarchies, religion, notions of times, roles, spatial relations, etc., etc., etc. Look at how intricate and nuanced culture is. So when we reduce young people to how they dress, the songs they listen to, how they wear their hair, and what their skin complexion is, when we reduce them to that base level of culture, look at what we're missing. Look at the richness and the depth of what we're missing when we say, you should really pull your pants up. And then we make basic assumptions from a cultural perspective because somebody has their pants at a certain level on their behind, if we can just be honest. So I want you to take a look, and I want you to, in the chat, what word, just give me the word from this definition. What word stands out to you the most when you look at culture, this definition of culture? What word, what pops, what word comes out at you the most?
Yeah. Cumulative beliefs, experience, a bunch of experience, cumulative generations, attitudes, cumulative experience, beliefs, values. Group of people, and value.
Mm-hmm.
Group.
Now, dare I say, in this definition of culture, what we've done far too often, we've relegated to the group of people. But we haven't done as much work on realizing that there's a cumulative effect in regard to the deposit cumulatively on a person. In other words, our young people don't come to us without having something deposited in them from a cultural capacity or the beliefs or the values. So today, that's what I want to look at. But what I want to do is I want us to take a look at a couple things. One, I just want to talk about what cultural competence is and is not. And I want to put that out there first before we get into not the exhaustive list of best practices, because we don't have a lot of time. I know I'm in my passion area right now and I can get long-winded. So I'm going to just give you a couple of things that I deem based on some research, best practices. But we got to get out the way what cultural competence is and what cultural competence is not. First and foremost, cultural competence just is simply at a base level, knowing the community where the school is located. I am not talking about the address. I'm not talking about knowing structurally where your learning community is located. Knowing what are the nuances of the community. Is the community experiencing any changes demographically? Are there any things happening or occurring socioeconomically in the community? What's the hot button conversation about the community where your learning organization is located? In other words, what's going on in the community? Other than the fact that young people show up every day and we say that we have an outstanding job to teach them because teaching is the most noble profession in the world. But outside of that, what's going on? In my Marvin Gaye voice, what's going on? What's happening in the community where the school is located? Cultural competence is understanding that all people have a unique worldview. And we're going to talk about something that I've termed neo-indigenous indoctrination in a few, coming from my Christopher Emdin reading that I use for my text for my class. But understanding that the students who come into your class, yes, they have a unique worldview. It is not our job to assimilate them to ours, but it's our job to understand they come with a unique worldview as well. Cultural competence is using curriculum that is respectful of and relevant to the cultures represented in a student body. In other words, does your curriculum look like those who you teach? And we'll talk more about that because I can, if I want to put a pin right here, I recall in my role as assistant dean, I was observing a student teacher, 8th grade student teacher, social studies. And it was a mix. The classroom was mixed in terms of diverse. But when I looked at this 1,000-page book on U.S. history, and I looked at the pages that talk to other cultures outside of what we perceive to be the dominant culture, I'm like, wait a minute. Why are there only 15 pages of Black history in this book? And it starts with Martin Luther King. We really have to understand that the curriculum must be representative of the students that you teach. It must be represented in all, because it's all U.S. history. Being alert to the ways that culture affects who we are. Placing a locus of responsibility on the professional and the institution. In other words, the buy-in to being culturally competent is not just solely the responsibility of the parents and the children. It is our responsibility as well. Examining the systems, structures, policies, and practices for their impact on all students and families. In other words, is something we're doing has not been effective over a course of time, then maybe there's an examination that needs to take place where we say, are we being culturally competent? And that's that introspective look that we as educators and leaders have to take. So we take a look at, and mind you, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things that cultural competence is. But I do want to point out what cultural competence is not. Good intentions. Well, I tried. I gave it the old college try. Cultural competence is not good intentions. Cultural competence, they're not cultural celebrations at designated times of the year in designated ways. Let me be a little more blunt. We all know what occurs when February comes around and it's time for us to decorate our classrooms and put stuff around our building. Somebody please put in the chat, what do we do in February?
Black History Month.
And then we turn right around in March and say, okay, time's up. Got that out the way. We check that box off. If you are specifically, especially if you're teaching in an urban setting, yeah, okay, more to come on that. Okay, cultural competence is not a list of stereotypes about what people from a particular cultural group do. Now I need to stop and pause for a minute because you see in red who's ready to be uncomfortable. One of the things that I want us to understand, which is why I said knowing ourselves, is that we all come from a place of bias. All of us have an inherent bias that we come to the table with. Let's test the theory. Okay, somebody give me, in the chat, give me some stereotypes about Asians. Remember I said, if you're ready to be uncomfortable, there's learning and abrasion. Give them some stereotypes about Asians.
They're smart, good at math.
Mm-hmm. Give some stereotypes about
got on their head, they're smart, they're disciplined.
Mm-hmm. Give them some stereotypes about whites.
Education is important. Assuming that's for whites. Entitled.
Give me some stereotypes about Black people.
Superior family, lazy. I think superior family structure was white, poor, emotional, poor, don't care about education, inferior, don't care, oppressed, no support at home, needy.
Give me some stereotypes about, and by the way, listen, it never fails. And Dr. Duncan, if you see it, let me know. It never fails. Somebody will definitely put fried chicken up there.
Didn't see fried chicken yet.
Come on, it never fails. And can I be honest with you? one time I did this workshop, I had to stop and hit the pause button because they was getting to, they felt like they was on Jeopardy. I mean, they was just going in. I'm like, time out. Y'all know, wait, where y'all getting all these stereotypes from? Y'all know too much. So normally watermelon fried chicken go up there, but Hispanics, give me some stereotypes about Hispanics.
All right, somebody put fried chicken.
I knew they did. I knew it was coming.
Loud, undocumented, loud, vivacious, lots of children and illegal, partying, lots of children, don't speak English, or lots of children, aggressive, hard workers, speak Spanish at home, family oriented.
Welcome to Cultural Competence 101, because here's the first thing I want to point out. Did anybody notice something that occurred? What occurred?
So it's saying no white stereotypes. We had a few.
There was some.
A lot more participation.
Mm-hmm.
Stereotyping, negative comments for Hispanics and Blacks. I was uncomfortable, hard to come up with white stereotypes. We normed around some groups more quickly than others. Negative assignments to people of color. Comments became more negative with last groups. And we never addressed any positive elements. Here are the statements, don't like them, hard to put down. More negative comments for most groups other than whites.
Okay. Excellent. Now, this, and I want to say this for this group, that you are not alone in what just occurred, because I've literally done this dozens of times and it has happened every single time. Literally. And there's a reason why I do the order that I do. Because when I asked about Asians and whites, immediately it went to capacity, intellectual capacity. It went to educational values. But when I went to Blacks, Hispanics, it went to behavior. And this is in a room full of educators, which goes back to my point, is that we all come to the table with biases, because we have to ask ourselves, we didn't just learn this yesterday. This is something that we have learned from our own cultural perspective. Some of this was learned in our own homes. Some of this was learned around our own kitchen table. Some of this was learned and passed down from people that we love dearly, grandmom and grandpop and whoever. So we have to, so when I say first, to our own self be true, and knowing who we are first and foremost, this is who we bring to our cultural, to our learning and organizational context. This is who we bring, because this is who we are. Because we do bring assumptions that all students from one culture operate in similar ways and have had similar experiences. We do operate from this capacity that we see of our own stereotypes. We can no more separate our biases from ourselves than we can separate ourselves physically from our own physical body when we enter a classroom or building learning environment. We bring that in. Now, what we have to do is we have to relearn and unlearn. Unlearn some of the things that have been given to us, but now we have to relearn what cultural competence really means. And I'm gonna finish this out. Simple tolerance, but the one thing I want to help somebody today. I want to give you a takeaway. When people say, well, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. I want to help you. We do. We see color. If you look at the screen, your presenter is a Black man. It is undeniable. We inherently see color. We have to understand that if we say we don't see color, what you're saying is that you don't see the journey that one has traveled culturally. You don't see what they've gone through from a generational perspective. You don't see the value and the richness of the contribution of said culture. When we say, I don't see color, because we all have contributed to this thing called society in some respect, in some way. We have all contributed to it. And to say, I don't see color means that we're negating the contribution of that particular culture. That means we're going to assimilation, which translates into neo-indigenous indoctrination. But more on that. How much time do I have? About 20 minutes?
It is 3:37, so.
Okay. And I want to stop and pause here. If you're getting value out of this, and this is something that that you can take away? Just give me a thumbs up emoji or reaction emoji if this is something that is valuable to you at this point. Just hit me with that thumbs up emoji. There you go. I guess you can tell I'm a very interactive person. So when I do this, I'm walking around a room, I'm making people uncomfortable, I'm making people think, I'm making people engage. So this is my way of engaging. So thank you for that. So let me go ahead and okay. So what does this mean to us as educators? That means that developing cultural competence results in an ability to understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people across cultures, students and families. There's somebody waiting to come into in the waiting room. I just admitted her. There we go. All right. So this is what it means for us as educators. So who are we in all of this? Until you understand your own culture, until you understand what you bring to the table as a person, until you understand that there are some inherent biases that the educational system simply indoctrinates you with, is just part of a larger systemic issue. Until we understand that, we can't understand another's, but more on that later. So I want you to break into groups, because when I was an educator, one of the things I developed a who am I chart. And I got that from Dr. Stephen Peters. And right now he's a superintendent in South Carolina, but at the time he was a consultant. And he developed this thing called Who Am I? And I noticed that when I started doing Who Am I, now I was in an urban setting, 95% African American, and I'm thinking, hey, I'm black, you black, I got this, I understand you. And I learned it's much more intricate than that. So when I finally got to the place in my educational career, and I'm glad I found out early, around year 3 of my 10-year teaching experience, who are you? Who are you? What makes you you outside of your behavior? What makes you you? And I taught 6th grade, so I was on that end of the attitude spectrum because with those 6th graders. So once I separated who they were from the behavior, to find out what makes you tick, what makes you you, then I started having much better interactions. So let's talk in some groups, because I want you to answer a couple of questions for me. There's some inventories that I normally did, and I want you to do this in your breakout groups in just 5 minutes. How do people in your family share important information and stories? Name the top 3 values or beliefs of your family. In other words, what core things does your family hold dear? And what's the common belief faith system that's practiced in your family? Are you Protestant? Are you Catholic? Are you Muslim? Are you atheist? Are you agnostic? Are you deist? Whatever. What's common belief practice? So what I would like for you to do is, and it's going to be random, just talk about how do people in your family share important information. Name 3 top values or beliefs of your family, and what's the common faith system? And then we can go from there.
Sure, and there'll be 4 to 5 people in a room. That's okay, or would you rather do 5 to 6?
Let's we can do 5 to 6 because we're only going to go with 5 minutes, and we're just going to discuss these things real quick.
All right.
Then we can come back in 5 minutes.
So I'm going to send you to your rooms, and then I'll close them in 5 minutes.
Send you to your rooms. I love it.
In a nice way.
I love it. Okay. See everybody around 3:48, 3:49.
You need to accept, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. So we have,
Okay. So we have 2.
yeah, Angela, let me see if I can get.
Okay. Oh, you might want to put them in the waiting room?
I can.
They may have stepped away.
Yeah. not quite sure how to put them in a waiting room.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, waiting room and Jorge Rodriguez. Put in waiting room. Got it. All right,
Okay.
so it's just you and I left.
Yes. Good.
Okay, so far, how do you think everything's going?
I think it's great. I mean, I really like the just keeping an eye on the chat in case something happens. But very good. I really like the frequent questions to the chat. I think it keeps people attending.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I really like your presentation too. Stuff that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of how we're construing students and culture and the very narrow kinds of definitions that we have for culture that are not deep.
Yeah, we have work to do. We have a lot of undoing to do.
Yeah.
A lot of undoing.
Yeah. I'm surprised one question, well, maybe people weren't really asking questions. I was going to encourage people after they came back, if they have questions, to put them in the chat. But one question that I often hear around these issues, well, what if you have a diverse classroom? How do you make sure your curriculum works for all of, right? That's a question that I've seen my own pre-service teachers raise. It's, how do I make it relevant to everyone?
Absolutely. And one of the things that and there's a story that I often share, that one year I was in a predominantly bilingual learning environment. As a matter of fact, it was the ESL building in our district. And I would say maybe 4 Black children in the building. And when Black History Month rolled around, I asked the question, what are we doing? And the response I got was, well, we don't have a lot of Black people in the building, so there's no need. So the learning, what I said to the person was, it was for other cultures to learn about other cultures. That's who needs it. That's what the learning, that's how you undo a lot of the doing.
Yeah.
But that's that ingrained, mindset. And it is an ingrained mindset. And a lot of it has to do with how we were indoctrinated culturally, educationally, societally. All of that stuff impacts. And then we become educators ourselves, and we bring that core beliefs to the table.
Absolutely.
We don't run from who we are. We bring it to the table, then wonder why things are the way they are, because we have not undone a lot of what has been done.
Yeah.
We have to deconstruct a lot of these pathetic ideologies and constructs. Really, we have to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just telling everyone 2 more minutes. I'm just broadcast, and then in about a minute I'll shut it down, and then it'll count down 60, and then they'll come back. But yeah, I mean, I think that, the responses seem typical of what I would expect to your questions, and it seems like people are learning things.
Yeah.
So I emailed you back. I don't know if you got it, but there is no survey specific to this. So I don't know if you want to put something in the chat. I don't know how you want to.
I'll hopefully they may speak to it. What I'll ask them to do is maybe if they can just speak to it in the larger
yeah, that's a good idea.
Evaluation content.
Yeah, maybe specifically point out I went to this session with X and
because I said I always like to do takeaways, especially with the time given. There's so much I would love to do.
Yeah.
And, but I love the takeaways because it helps me to broaden this and make it better and more informative.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I'm gonna, in a little bit, I'm gonna admit our 2 people that are in the waiting room.
Gotcha.
And then
coming back in.
And then everybody else. People should start filing in soon. They have 37 seconds, but sometimes people join earlier. So I'm going to admit
here we are.
Our waiting room people. And everybody should be coming in. And if you have questions, please do put them in the chat. I know some people right at the top of the chat, I said, write questions in the chat, but then it kind of disappeared.
Hopefully we'll have a chance for some Q&A time if you so desire at the conclusion of this. So please, if you have any questions, something that's pressing, please by all means put it in the chat.
I think everyone is mostly back.
Okay, now here's what I want to ask you. The exercise you just did, how can that be beneficial to you in your learning context? Put that respond in the chat. What you just did, how can that be beneficial to you in your learning context?
These types of sharing helped us to see common threads quickly, allowed us to learn about folks grounding, owning who I am, and celebrating with confidence, allowing people to learn about each other while finding commonalities about values, learning to appreciate what people share about their families.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Getting to know others with whom one is interacting. You have to know who the students in your classroom are. Tell them who you are and ask them. As a trainer of an adult learners, learning about others' cultures makes me a better trainer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A couple more?
We had age and other visible differences that were easy to see. The invisible was what we had in common, saw it clearly when we talked. Connecting to students and valuing others.
Awesome. And I would implore you, the reason I put that up there is it goes back to when I did my Who Am I? And I realized that there's some things I had in common with my students. There were some things that I knew that I found out, but also it allowed me to do a connective thread. So for example, when the month of November came around, I already knew whose birthday was in November. And when they walked in the classroom, it was happy birthday to such and such and such, which shows that I cared enough to think about that. So it gives you that that quote unquote ammunition to really start making connections when you have these kind of conversations, or you can build your own. You can build whatever kind of conversation pieces you want. Here's another one that I do, personal inventory B. You know, if your house is burning down, what 3 items would you try to save? And which holidays do your family value the most? Because I get a lot of Thanksgiving. And what that says to me is that there's a value of family. There's that connection, that family connection, you know? So these are things that we can do. So why do we do this? Once again, to make those connections. But remember that statement I made a few slides back about understanding your own culture that may have seemed kind of out of place at the time? There's a quote from one of my favorite songs, and I'm dating myself, but it's all good. Somebody may catch it. You can run, you can't hide, you can't go far. No matter where you go, there you are. I'll give it away. Naughty by Nature. Uptown Anthem. So in other words, who we are, we take with us. Who we are, we bring to the table with us. What we believe, what we perceive, how we function, how we think, how we teach, how we relate to other people. It all comes from who we are. It all comes from a lived experience. It all comes from a learned experience. So this is who we bring to the table. I'm emphasizing the point that we don't miraculously leave who we are at the front door when we show up. How we teach, respond, judge, stereotype, it derived from the origins of our cultural perspective. And far too often and far too long, most education has taken place from a neo-indigenous perspective of educational indoctrination rather than cultural competence. So all of those words, you know, I say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Does anybody know who that is? If you know who that is, please put it in the chat. This is for all my history teachers, my sports fans. Who do we have in that picture?
Jim Thorpe.
Jim Thorpe. Absolutely. Who knew he was Native American?
I didn't know his name.
Who knows what the C on his chest stands for? This is what I tell my students in my class. I said, the shovel's in the ground. We about to go a little deeper. Anybody know what the C stands for?
Cherokee, Columbia.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
The Cambridge School, Pennsylvania.
his college, right?
His high school. He went to a assimilation school in Pennsylvania. And the overall role of the school was to take Native American children and indoctrinate them into Americanness so that they could become less Native American and more American. And this is what happened. By the way, raise your hands if you don't believe me. Give me a thumbs up if you don't believe me. Okay, so this is Jim Thorpe, the actual Jim Thorpe. But I want to show you something. Anybody know who Burt Lancaster is? This was a movie about Jim Thorpe, All-American. What do you see? Tell me what you see.
Actor, white athlete.
Go deeper. What else do you see?
White faces, white and glamorized.
What else do you see? Come on. Come on. You're there. You're there. You're getting there. Come on.
That all-American, American flag, all-American.
Mm-hmm. He wore America's heart over his.
Yeah, red, white, and blue, hair, white culture, yeah.
He wore America's heart over his. So his Native American heart wasn't good enough. It had to be Americanized. To the point that his ethnicity wasn't even good enough for somebody from his cultural context to play him on screen. This, ladies and gentlemen, is neo-indigenous indoctrination, where we are subliminally telling our students, this is how you should act. I know what you come into the classroom with culturally, but this is how you should act. This is how you should look. This is how you should walk. This is the music you should listen to. This is how you should wear your hair. This is what happens when we don't bring cultural competence into our educational learning environments. We're pretty much doing neo-indigenous indoctrination. In other words, if you want to blend in, if you want to get a good job when you're older, if you want to do this, you have to act like this. Lose yourself, lose your culture, because this is the culture that's pervasive, and that's what you got to fit into. Okay. All right. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to just talk about some. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. I want to spend the majority of time on us as people, because we're the ones who. Let me ask you a question. Have any of you as educators ever run into your students outside the learning environment, at a store or something, at a restaurant, and they look like they just saw Superman or Superwoman? Their opinion of us is so elevated. How they view us is so elevated that they take their cues of growth from us. That is, in loco parentis, New Jersey statute, in the absence of the parent, we are it. We have a tremendous job, which is why, from the vantage point of cultural competency, I wanted to put the onus on the microscope on us as people first, so that we can say, maybe I need to unlearn some stuff and do the hard work of looking deeply and introspectively at who I am in all of this, so maybe I can get to the point of walking in some cultural competency. So, first one, have high academic standards and expectations for all your students. And I call this the awe factor. The awe factor. Dr. Gray, what are you talking about, the awe factor? Oh, you've had a hard life. I'm not going to push you as hard. You come from a broken home. I'm not going to give you as much work to do. Oh, you've had it rough. I'm going to let you slide. No, you respect people more from a cultural capacity vantage point when you hold them to a higher standard. That means you care. That means you care. You care enough to want them to be the best and excel. There's no culture that values mediocrity. No culture values apathy and mediocrity as the standard of excellence. None. There's not a culture on the planet that speaks to that thing of saying, wow, you're mediocre. That is perfect fine with us. No culture. Everybody deserves the respect to be challenged and pushed and given the resources to excel. Because if you have high standards for somebody, and if you have high hopes for somebody, you'll teach them as such, and you'll give them what they need to do as such. So the expectations are followed with us being different people and us giving them what they need, because we're holding them and us to a higher standard. Because as they succeed, so do we. As they excel, so do we. And that's that collaborative partnership of cultural dynamics that we have to look at as well. I remember one teacher that I taught next door to. And you know how we lay our rules down the first day of school. You know, we want to lay it down. And I heard our doors are open. Welcome to my class. And you are here borrowing space in my house until June. So that year was over. That year was over. So we have to be mindful of the expectations, because the expectation that we set speaks volumes to how much we respect our students. Because here's how they think. I am who I think you think I am. That's the mindset of students. I am who I think you think I am, because they'll live up to expectations. And a perfect example of that is, and this happened to me as an administrator, and it happened to me as a teacher. What happens when you get evaluated and you don't have a good relationship with your students, but you're getting evaluated and the administrator walks in the room? Somebody put in the chat, what happens? If you don't have a good relationship with your students, but yet still you have evaluation and the principal comes in, what do students do?
Act out. The reverse is true. It's the student's classroom. My job is to provide what they need to learn. They show their behinds.
They turn up. But if the relationship is intact, they will protect that teacher, say, we're not going to do that to that teacher. It has been researched that students perform better on standardized tests based on a relationship they have with their instructor. It all comes down to a cultural symbiosis that we have to have with our students. So that number one, have high expectations. Number two, welcome students to a learning environment that is also theirs. They should see themselves when they walk into the classroom. They should not, I'm trying to say this mildly, but there's no way to put it. They should not see symbols of oppression all year long and then expect them to have cultural buy-in to the classroom. They should not. They should see themselves in positive lights. They should see themselves from a vantage point of having contributed to this thing called the larger society. They should see themselves in that role as well. They should be represented fully in that classroom environment when they walk in, not just because the calendar flips over to February. They should see themselves when they walk in fully represented. They should see other cultures represented, not just because we're dictated by the calendar. We should have an environment that says, this is yours as well. That you're not just renting space till June, that this is yours. What they visually see and feel impacts how they perceive the teacher, how they perceive the learning environment, because if the first thing they walk into is a blank wall and a bunch of rules, because you know we're good for that. These are my rules. So we have to even rethink from a visual standpoint, which affects them viscerally, what do they walk into? So that best practice is, what does my room look like? What does it feel like? Third, demonstrate to them that you value their culture and language, that you know that you're prepared to engage them biculturally. In other words, who are your students? No, really, who are they? Who are they? Not just their name. And we have to do more digging. And I came into education in 1997, and this used to be the thing. We would get our list, and we would go to last year's teacher, and we would get the rundown. We would say, okay, who's the troublemaker? Who's the smart one? And that's how we would get to know our students. So we would have a preconceived notion of them based on their experience with the previous teacher, and then we would act accordingly. But who are they really? The job and the onus is to do the who am I. Before you jump into your curriculum and your pacing chart, who is in front of you? Who are you responsible for? If in loco parentis means that much to us, my litmus test is, my youngest is in 4th grade. I want that teacher to treat her as I would. Who are your students? Who are you responsible for? So you have to get to know them holistically. Who are they? Lastly, teach from a place where I've termed empathetic instructional delivery. Empathy and competence are connected. You can have expectations, but you can also have empathy, and you can come from a place of empathetic instructional delivery. One without the other renders all attempts at effective instruction null and void. There was a student that I was called to a classroom when I was a vice principal, and the student was sleeping, and the teacher, instead of finding out why, it became punitive. I found out why, because she was up all night babysitting her siblings, and then had to come to school and expect to be alert and wide awake. So to know that student means that you have an empathy and that you can act upon that. That means you're learning and knowing your students from a cultural perspective. Remember I said, know your community? If you take the time to know your community and know your students, and also realize that you come from a cultural perspective that's all your own, and students come from a cultural perspective that's theirs, then we start on the road to cultural competency. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I've run out of time. Like I said, this is a passion place for me, so I know I can keep going on and on. So if we have time for Q&A, I would open it up. If this has been valuable to you and you've got something out of it, please let me know in 2 ways. One, give me a thumbs up, but also I like to know how I can do this better. So in the evaluation, if there's something that you would like to get from this or learn from and grow that I can do better for the next group, please let me know, because I would like to build upon that. And that's just some websites for resources for cultural competency. Okay, Dr. Duncan, do we have time for Q&A?
Well, so the next session theoretically is starting now. So what I suggest is, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I can write them down. Like, I can take a picture of the chat, and then perhaps we can find a way to communicate answers back. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. This has been an amazing session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to share my passion with you. Have an outstanding, wonderful year. And thank you so much for being present.